Why a woman should never get married. Jung's forbidden truth. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung once said, and few choices shape that journey more deeply than the decision to marry. In today's episode on spiritual wisdom, we explore why a woman should never get married. Jung's forbidden truth, a bold psychological and spiritual reflection on identity, freedom, and unconscious bonds that quietly shape our lives. As you listen, I invite you to reflect honestly on your own path. Are your choices guided by your true self, or by hidden expectations you've never questioned? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's begin this powerful conversation together. 1. Marriage without inner union leads to projection and disillusionment. A woman who enters marriage before truly knowing her own soul often mistakes emotional attachment for wholeness and unconsciously projects her inner masculine force, the animus, onto her partner, believing he will complete what she has not yet discovered within herself. This illusion of completion gives birth to deep dependency, because the man is no longer seen as a human being, but as a living symbol of safety, direction, protection, and identity. At first, this projection feels like destiny, intense attraction, and emotional fusion. Yet over time, disillusionment emerges when he inevitably fails to carry the weight of a role that was never his to bear. What is truly being sought outwardly is an inner union that has not yet been achieved. And when that realization does not come, emotional collapse feels personal, even when it is structural. From the lens of Carl Jung's psychology, this projection is not a flaw in love, but a consequence of incomplete inner development. What a woman does not consciously live within herself, she will instinctively search for in another. If she has not yet developed her inner authority, clarity, independence, and self-trust, she will be magnetized towards someone who appears to embody these traits. Yet the moment she hands her inner power to another human being, she becomes spiritually and emotionally dependent. This is where spirituality and spiritual awakening reveal their deeper function, not as belief systems, but as liberation from unconscious attachment patterns. Without this awakening, love becomes a transaction of unmet needs, rather than a conscious exchange between two whole beings. When a woman has not integrated her animus, she may silence her voice to preserve harmony, sacrifice her growth for emotional safety, and compress her dreams to avoid threatening the relationship. Over time, she may feel unseen, unheard, and energetically drained, yet remain attached to the bond because her identity is intertwined with the role she plays within it. This is not love as devotion, but love as survival. Jung warned that when inner opposites remain divided, outer relationships must compensate for the imbalance, and compensation always breeds pressure, distortion, and eventual fracture. Spiritual awakening begins when a woman recognizes that no partner can rescue her from the responsibility of becoming whole. At this stage, she sees how childhood emotional patterns shape adult attachment, how the craving to be chosen often comes from years of invisibility, and how the need for constant reassurance echoes wounds that were never consciously healed. As awareness deepens, she stops demanding that a husband repair what still aches within her inner child. Instead, she becomes the protector of her own vulnerability, the witness to her own emotions, and the authority of her own direction. This is the moment when inner marriage begins. Her inner masculine energy no longer seeks power through control or external validation, but through grounded presence, self-discipline, and emotional integrity. Her inner feminine energy no longer seeks safety through dependency, but through self-respect, creative freedom, and emotional truth. When these forces unite within her, she no longer seeks completion through another body, another name, or another identity. Love no longer carries the weight of salvation. It becomes a space of shared growth instead of a refuge from personal emptiness. From this inner union, attraction transforms. She is no longer drawn to dominance out of insecurity or to distance out of unresolved wounds. She chooses consciously rather than compulsively. A relationship, if it appears, arrives as a reflection of wholeness rather than a substitute for it. The man she stands beside is no longer required to be her purpose, her strength, or her direction. He becomes a companion, not a cornerstone. This is why marriage without inner union so often leads to projection and disillusionment. The tragedy is not in the institution of marriage itself, but in entering it as an unfinished self-seeking rescue through romance. When a woman walks the path of spiritual awakening before surrendering her autonomy, she no longer disappears inside love. She remains rooted inside herself. And only from this state does connection become conscious rather than compulsive, sacred rather than sacrificial, and real rather than symbolic. Have you ever noticed yourself projecting your hopes or fears onto someone you love? If so, share your experience in the comments so we can all learn from one another. And if this insight resonated with you for the first time, simply comment, "I choose inner union," so we can walk this journey of spiritual wisdom together. 2. Society has conditioned women to find worth in being chosen. Society has conditioned women to believe that their worth is found in being chosen. And this invisible belief is quietly planted through traditions, family expectations, and cultural storytelling that place marriage at the center of a woman's value. From an early age, you are taught directly and indirectly that becoming a bride, a wife, or a mother is the ultimate proof that you are enough, that you are lovable, that you matter. While these roles can be meaningful when they arise from freedom and inner alignment, they often become cages when they are accepted as obligations rather than conscious choices, subtly training you to measure your life through external validation instead of inner truth and spiritual development. As this conditioning settles into your subconscious, it quietly reshapes how you relate to yourself. You may begin to chase approval instead of authenticity, belonging instead of self-respect, and security instead of self-realization. The desire to be chosen can become so powerful that you start adjusting your personality, your dreams, and even your boundaries to fit what you believe will make you acceptable. Over time, this creates an inner split, where your outer life looks socially successful, yet your inner world feels increasingly disconnected from your true self and from your own spirituality. You may appear fulfilled on the surface while feeling emotionally and spiritually empty beneath the performance. This unconscious script teaches you that being alone equals failure, that choosing yourself is selfish, and that waiting to be selected is more honorable than standing in your own power. Under this pressure, many women learn to silence their intuition, tolerate emotional neglect, and overextend themselves just to protect a relationship that validates their identity. The fear of not being chosen can slowly become a fear of being yourself. Each compromise seems small, yet collectively they erode your sense of identity until you no longer recognize the woman you once were before you learn to shrink for acceptance. From a Jungian perspective, this dynamic pulls you away from the self, the deeper, authentic center of your being, and traps you in the persona, the social mask created to survive expectations. Jung warned that a life built on the persona alone eventually produces anxiety, resentment, and emotional exhaustion because it denies the soul space to breathe. When your identity is built around being chosen by another, your inner authority is weakened, and your spiritual development is delayed. You become dependent, not just emotionally, but existentially, on how others reflect you back to yourself. This is where the idea that a woman should never get married becomes symbolic rather than literal. It is not a rejection of love or partnership, but a refusal to enter any union from fear, lack, or self-abandonment. It is a warning against marrying for validation, for social safety, or for the illusion of completion. When marriage is used to escape loneliness, uncertainty, or unresolved wounds, it becomes a spiritual shortcut that avoids the deeper work of self-knowledge, healing, and inner integration. Only when you return to yourself, when you listen to your instincts, honor your solitude, and commit to your spiritual development, do you begin to experience real freedom. In that freedom, your identity no longer depends on being selected, approved of, or socially crowned. You stop trying to earn love and begin to embody it. You stop negotiating your worth and start living from it. Relationship, if it enters your life at that stage, becomes an extension of wholeness rather than a remedy for emptiness. The deeper truth beneath this message is that your first and most sacred commitment is to your own soul. Before you promise loyalty to another, you must be loyal to your truth, your healing, your purpose, and your spiritual development. When you choose yourself first, you no longer beg life to choose you back. You stand already chosen by your own consciousness, already rooted in your own worth, already aligned with your own spirituality. This is the foundation upon which any healthy relationship must rest. Otherwise, it becomes another version of self-betrayal dressed up as love. 3. The inner marriage is the true marriage. Real transformation in your life does not begin with a partner, a ring, or a ceremony. It begins the moment you unite with your own inner self. What Carl Jung described as the sacred union of the anima and the animus, the feminine and masculine energies within you, is what true wholeness actually looks like. Until this inner marriage happens, most outer relationships are shaped more by need than by resonance, more by fear than by freedom. You may believe you are choosing love, yet unconsciously, you may be seeking safety, validation, or escape from loneliness. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And nowhere is this more visible than in romantic relationships formed without inner clarity. When you have not united with yourself, love easily turns into attachment. You may cling to people who mirror your wounds instead of your worth. You may shrink your voice to avoid abandonment, tolerate emotional starvation to preserve connection, or confuse intensity with intimacy. This is why so many marriages feel confusing, heavy, or silently painful, not because love is wrong, but because the inner foundation is missing. Without inner marriage, Partnership becomes an exchange of unmet needs rather than a meeting of two whole beings. Rumi captured this truth simply when he said, "Why are you busy looking for a partner? Look for the partner within." When your inner masculine protects your boundaries and your inner feminine trusts her intuition, your standards rise naturally. You no longer negotiate your dignity for affection or mistake control for care. As your inner union strengthens, something profound shifts in how you relate to the world. You stop seeking someone to save you, complete you, or define you, because you finally recognize your own solidity. You move from emotional hunger into emotional presence. You begin to feel the difference between attachment and devotion, between longing and love, between loneliness and genuine connection. You no longer chase being chosen because you have chosen yourself. This does not make you cold or closed to connection. It makes you grounded. And grounded people love from abundance rather than from lack. Many people rush toward marriage believing it will heal their insecurity, soothe their fear of abandonment, or finally make them feel whole. Yet those wounds do not vanish inside commitment. They simply move into a shared space and often deepen under pressure. Inner emptiness cannot be solved by outer structures. Only self-integration can do that. Jung taught that wholeness is not created by cutting off parts of yourself, but by fully integrating them. When you commit first to your inner world, you realize you were never broken. You were simply disconnected from yourself. Once your inner marriage is complete, relationships become a conscious choice rather than a survival strategy. Love becomes a celebration, not a rescue mission. If partnership comes, it adds to your freedom instead of replacing it. If it does not come right away, your life does not collapse into despair, because your center is no longer outside of you. This is the deeper layer of spiritual wisdom that few people are taught, that outer marriage without inner union often leads to quiet sacrifice and invisible loneliness, while inner marriage without outer validation creates peace that no external condition can steal. You stop fearing being alone because you are no longer abandoned inside yourself. You stop staying where your soul feels small because your inner authority is awake. You recognize that the most sacred vow is not spoken to another person, but lived in loyalty to your own truth. When you belong fully to yourself, every relationship you choose afterward is rooted in resonance rather than need, freedom rather than fear, devotion rather than dependency. And this is the real transformation that changes not only how you love, but how you live. If you're ready to honor your inner union and step into your true wholeness, comment below. I choose my inner marriage. 4. Romantic love often masks a fear of solitude and the unknown. Romantic love often hides a quieter truth beneath its beauty. For many women, the pull toward marriage is not always driven by deep, awakened love, but by a lingering fear of solitude and the unknown. From a young age, women are subtly taught that being alone is a failure, that time is running out, and that security must be chosen quickly before it disappears. Under this pressure, love becomes tangled with survival instincts, and the desire for companionship is fused with the fear of being left behind. What appears on the surface as devotion can, at its core, be the anxiety of standing alone in a world that equates partnership with worth. It is here that romantic love begins to mask fear, and fear becomes the silent architect of life-altering decisions. Carl Jung, warned that what remains unconscious rules our lives as fate. And when fear is allowed to guide love, a woman may unknowingly bind herself not only to another person, but to the very anxiety she never fully faced. When marriage is chosen from fear rather than inner clarity, something subtle but profound is often lost in the connection to the woman's creative, mystical, or wild self. This is the part of her that dreams without permission, that feels deeply, that senses truth without needing proof. Yet society frequently asks her to tame this aspect of herself in exchange for stability, approval, and safety. Over time, she may trade instinct for routine, imagination for responsibility, inner fire for social acceptance. Jung understood that the wild self is not chaos, but a vital psychological force, the wellspring of authenticity and meaning. When it is suppressed, the result is not immediate disaster, but quiet disconnection, emotional dullness, unnameable grief, a chronic sense that something essential has gone missing. Externally, life may appear a successful home, partner, structure, but internally, the soul begins to hunger for the part of itself it abandoned. This is not simply emotional dissatisfaction. It is a spiritual fracture that expands slowly and silently. As the years pass, this hidden sacrifice often reveals itself through restlessness, quiet resentment, or a persistent feeling of emptiness that no achievement seems to heal. The woman may love her partner sincerely, yet still feel haunted by an unfulfilled inner life. This is where spirituality becomes more than belief, it becomes survival. Through spirituality, she begins to recognize that solitude is not a punishment, but a sacred space of self-return. In spiritual awakening, loneliness transforms into initiation, and the darkness of the unknown becomes a doorway rather than a threat. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Yet fear-based love pulls a woman away from that becoming and persuades her to shrink herself into what is expected. Spiritual awakening reverses this process. It teaches her that she is not incomplete on her own, that partnership is not meant to rescue her from emptiness, but to meet her wholeness. This is why Jung's insight feels so unsettling. Many romantic bonds are not unions of liberated souls, but negotiations between unresolved fears. Two people do not always meet from strength, but from mutual avoidance of inner emptiness. When this happens, marriage no longer becomes a conscious shared journey. It becomes a shelter built against the terror of facing oneself. Yet when a woman matures through spirituality and undergoes true spiritual awakening, her relationship to love changes completely. She no longer seeks marriage as protection from solitude, but sees it, if she chooses it at all, as a partnership between two whole beings who are not escaping themselves, but expanding together. Love becomes an expression of fullness rather than a remedy for lack. The unknown is no longer an enemy, but a landscape of growth. Solitude is no longer a threat, but a source of power. And in reclaiming her wild, intuitive, creative nature, she does not become disconnected from love. She becomes capable of a deeper, freer, more conscious form of it. 5. The path of awakening requires a sacred rebellion. The path of awakening demands something most people are never taught how to give: a sacred rebellion against the invisible rules that have governed the inner world since childhood. To individuate, as Carl Jung described, a woman must disobey the internalized voices of patriarchy that quietly tell her she is only worthy when she is pleasing, serving, sacrificing, or shrinking herself to fit the emotional comfort of others. This rebellion is not against love, not against men, and not against relationship itself, but against inner oppression, false beliefs, and inherited roles that slowly cage the soul. You were not born to be a function in someone else's life. You were born to be a living center of awareness, creativity, and becoming. When a woman blindly follows roles that were never chosen by her true self, something vital inside begins to dim. Her energy fades. Her desires soften into silence. Her intuition becomes harder to hear. Yet the moment she dares to question, something ancient stirs awake within her, a quiet but unstoppable force that whispers, "There is more to you than what you were told." This is where true spirituality begins, not in ritual used as escape, but in the courage to rewrite life from the inside out. Many women are trained to confuse duty with destiny and obedience with love. In that confusion, they abandon their own becoming, trading fire for approval and truth for safety. The soul, however, was never designed to live inside a cage, even one decorated with romance, tradition, or the fear of being alone. This is why Jung's forbidden truth strikes so deeply. It reveals that marriage, when entered unconsciously, can become another structure that demands the quiet death of the wild, creative, sovereign self. Not because love is wrong, but because love without selfhood becomes self-erasure. When a woman abandons her individuation for belonging, she does not gain union, she loses herself. A relationship built upon that loss becomes a slow betrayal of the soul rather than a meeting of equals. True union can only emerge when two whole beings meet without needing to disappear inside each other. That wholeness is forged through the sacred rebellion of saying no to what diminishes you, even when everyone expects your yes. Ancient systems do not survive merely through rules. They survive through the fear inside you that obedience is safer than freedom. Yet every awakening in history begins with someone who chooses truth over comfort. In this case, that truth begins the moment you recognize that your worth does not come from usefulness, beauty, loyalty, or sacrifice, but from the simple fact that you exist as a conscious being within a living universe. Once you begin to live from that knowledge, your spiritual development accelerates naturally. You no longer beg for permission to become who you are. You no longer negotiate with your own intuition. You stop apologizing for your depth, your solitude, your vision, and your refusal to shrink. This shift does not make you cold or distant. It makes you clean inside. Love chosen from wholeness is no longer a transaction of fear, abandonment, or rescue. It becomes a meeting of light rather than an exchange of wounds. This is the true engine of spiritual development. The movement from unconscious survival into conscious creation, from inherited identity into embodied truth, and from silent obedience into authorship of one's own life. The rebellion itself is not loud. It is not angry. It is not destructive. It is deeply quiet and utterly unwavering. It is the daily decision to listen more to your soul than to fear, to your truth more than to tradition, and to your becoming more than to expectation. When that decision becomes stable within you, your sense of self no longer depends on validation. You stop asking whether you are allowed to live freely and begin living as if your freedom were always sacred. You learn that your worth is not earned through sacrifice. Your identity is not defined by roles. Your spirituality deepens only when you choose truth over approval, and your spiritual development accelerates the moment you stop betraying yourself for belonging. Love, at its highest expression, should never require self-abandonment, because the most sacred relationship you will ever build is the one you learn to sustain with your own awakened soul. If you feel the courage to walk your own path of awakening and sacred rebellion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's rise together in truth and inner freedom. 6. The woman becomes an archetype of wholeness and cosmic love. When you integrate your shadow and awaken your inner masculine energy, you stop searching for validation, permission, or ownership because something profound has already completed itself within you. And as Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Meaning that the moment this inner integration happens, you are no longer pulled by unconscious cravings for someone else to finish your story. Instead, you become luminous from within, whole by your own realization, and your love transforms into something that flows from abundance rather than from fear or emptiness. You no longer love in order to be completed. You love as a natural expression of consciousness, a quiet radiance that rises from inner stability. This shift turns you into an archetype of wholeness and cosmic love because you no longer project your unmet needs onto men, no longer hand over your power, and no longer confuse attachment with destiny or protection with self-abandonment. You begin to understand that real love is chosen, not begged for. And as Jung beautifully said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Yet that transformation can only be sacred when both souls are standing whole, not wounded or starving for identity. From this awakened center, even romance feels different, cleaner, lighter, more honest, because it is no longer driven by wounds, but by resonance, not by fear, but by freedom. You start to see why marriage, when entered from fragmentation, becomes a substitute for inner completion rather than a celebration of it. A woman who marries from lack often searches for a savior, but a woman who stands in her spiritual wisdom no longer seeks rescue. She becomes her own ground, her own center, her own source of direction. She stops looking for someone to complete her because she has completed herself. And from that wholeness, she can finally love without losing herself. This is the forbidden truth many resist. It is not marriage itself that is the issue, but the unconscious dependence that often hides beneath it. Once you awaken to this deeper layer of spiritual wisdom, you realize that true partnership only becomes holy when neither person is using the other to escape themselves. Love then becomes a reflection rather than a rescue, a conscious union rather than an emotional bargain, a meeting of two sovereign beings rather than a merging born from fear. And when a woman reaches this level of inner union, she becomes radiant, not because she turns away from love, but because she has purified it of desperation and transformed it into a form of presence. Her affection comes with no chains, no emotional manipulation, no silent demands. She loves because she chooses to, not because she must. She offers intimacy without ownership and devotion without dependence. This is the woman who embodies cosmic love. Grounded, sovereign, spiritually awake, and emotionally whole. 7. Relationships. After inner union are based on resonance, not dependency. After inner awakening, a woman may still choose partnership, but she no longer enters it from fear, lack, or emotional hunger. She chooses from fullness. This is the turning point, where spirituality becomes lived experience rather than an idea, where spiritual awakening is no longer something she studies, but something that reorganizes the entire structure of her relationships. From this place, love is no longer a strategy for survival. It becomes a conscious meeting between two whole beings. She has already faced her loneliness, her abandonment wounds, her need for approval, and the unconscious belief that she must be chosen to have value. Through this inner work, she has learned to belong to herself first, and from that belonging, she can finally offer love without bargaining her identity away. Relationships after inner union are therefore based on resonance, not dependency. She no longer seeks a partner to fill an inner void, to rescue her from emptiness, or to stabilize her sense of self. Instead, she seeks a connection that naturally aligns with her frequency, her values, and her emotional maturity. Dependency fades because she no longer needs another person to regulate her worth, her emotions, or her sense of direction. What arises instead is mutual presence. Two individuals standing in their own power, choosing each other not out of fear of being alone, but out of recognition. This recognition is quiet yet unmistakable. It is not driven by fantasy or urgency, but by clarity. These sacred unions are rare because they demand awareness from both sides. They require two people who have faced their shadows instead of projecting them, who take responsibility for their emotional wounds instead of outsourcing their healing. In such relationships, love is not built on illusion, but on honesty. There is space for truth without punishment, vulnerability without manipulation, and conflict without destruction. Growth becomes the shared language of the bond. Each partner becomes a mirror, not to shame the other, but to reflect what still seeks integration. In this way, intimacy stops being a performance and becomes a living process of transformation. After inner union, a woman can no longer tolerate relationships that trap her inside rigid roles. She no longer accepts being reduced to a function, a duty, or an emotional service. She understands that every role that denies her humanity slowly erodes her soul. Instead, she gravitates toward connections where she is allowed to be complex, evolving, strong, soft, grounded, and uncertain all at the same time. This is not rebellion against love. It is devotion to truth. And truth has no interest in containment for the sake of appearances. Every relationship becomes a classroom rather than a cage. When emotional friction arises, she does not immediately grasp for control, blame, or withdrawal. She pauses long enough to ask what within her is being activated. She understands that triggers often reveal unhealed parts rather than failures in the other person. From this awareness, she responds instead of reacting. This does not mean she tolerates what violates her boundaries. It means she enforces those boundaries without hatred, without self-betrayal, and without collapse. Inner union gives her that stability. Resonance begins to guide her choices more than chemistry. She no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. The nervous system no longer interprets chaos as passion. Instead, she learns to feel the difference between emotional addiction and emotional safety. A resonant connection does not overwhelm her sense of self. It strengthens it. It does not demand urgency. It allows timelessness. It does not destabilize her nervous system. It steadies it. Love becomes something that supports her breath rather than disrupts it. Freedom, not obligation, becomes the force that keeps partners together. No one is trapped by fear of abandonment, financial dependence, social pressure, or spiritual guilt. Each person remains because they want to, not because they must. This freedom paradoxically deepens commitment because what is chosen freely carries more integrity than what is maintained through fear. The relationship lasts not due to control or possession, but because both souls continue to find meaning in walking together. In this state, love becomes a field of mutual evolution. Each partner grows not by losing themselves, but by becoming more of themselves. The relationship does not promise constant comfort, it promises truth. It does not guarantee ease, it guarantees consciousness. And from that consciousness, something far more enduring than dependency is born shared becoming. This is not love as escape from self, but love as the expansion of self. Share your reflections in the comments below. Have you felt the difference between resonance and dependency in your relationships? I'd love to hear your experiences. Now, let's continue exploring the next powerful truth on the path of spiritual wisdom. 8. The alchemical journey requires facing the dark night of the soul. The alchemical journey you are invited into is a path that demands everything false to fall away, because true individuation, as Carl Jung explained, requires a spiritual death, a dissolving of the identities, roles, expectations, and illusions that once shaped how you saw yourself and how the world saw you. It is a shedding that feels like loss, but is actually liberation. And as you step into this deep inner work, you will find yourself walking through isolation, chaos, dreams, and shadows that strip away every layer that is not truly yours. This descent is not a punishment, but a sacred initiation, because the woman who dares to enter the dark night of the soul is stepping into the very fire that will purify and remake her. And although the path feels heavy and disorienting, it is through this breaking that the deeper truth of your spirit begins to rise. You may feel disconnected from the life you once knew, uncertain about who you are becoming, or shaken by emotions you cannot name. Yet these experiences are not signs of failure, but proof that the old self is dissolving so the real self can breathe. Jung's teaching: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, reveals why this stage is unavoidable. You cannot grow by avoiding your shadows. You grow by meeting them with courage and honesty. The confusion, the loneliness, the emotional unraveling are the sacred fire burning away the social masks, borrowed identities, and inherited beliefs that once defined your worth. Every fragment that falls away is clearing space for sovereignty, clarity, and inner authority to emerge. And though it feels like everything familiar is collapsing, what is truly happening is a restructuring of your soul around truth instead of fear. This is why the dark night of the soul must be understood as preparation rather than destruction, because nothing authentic can rise on a foundation built from pleasing others, performing roles, or chasing validation. The woman who walks this path begins to see that silence teaches more than noise, that solitude strengthens more than company, and that the dreams and shadows she once ignored now carry insights that logic alone could never provide. Spirituality, at its core, is not about seeking light. but about integrating the parts of yourself you once tried to escape. And spiritual development requires you to stay present with the discomfort long enough for transformation to complete its work. When the fire has finished its refining, you return to yourself without the need to be anything for anyone. You no longer cling to identities that kept you small, to relationships that drained your essence, or to beliefs that muted your inner voice. Instead, you stand in a quiet strength, softer but unshakable, aware that every breakdown was actually a breakthrough reshaping your life from the inside out. You understand that the dark night was not an interruption. It was the crossing that led you to your essence. And from this place of inner rebirth, you carry the lessons that truly liberate you. That facing your shadows is a path to personal power. That your pain is a teacher, not an enemy. That the fire purifies but never destroys what is real. And that the woman who survives this journey rises with a depth, clarity, and truth she could never have found without walking through the darkness. 9. The ultimate truth. She is the marriage she was seeking. The forbidden truth is not that love is an illusion, but that you were never meant to seek completion through another person. The truth is that you are both bride and groom, lover and beloved, the one who longs and the one who fulfills. When this realization awakens within you, the question of marriage begins to dissolve, not because love loses its value, but because love outgrows the need for external validation. What you were searching for in another was always trying to return you to yourself. As Carl Jung revealed with piercing clarity, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And for many, the unconscious pursuit of marriage is not romance, but a hidden attempt to escape inner emptiness. When you become whole, love no longer feels like hunger. You stop reaching outward as if something essential is missing. Instead, love becomes an overflow rather than a demand. You realize that much of what people call love is actually fear, dressed in longing, the fear of being alone, unseen, or unchosen. Yet wholeness changes everything. You no longer ask another to carry your wounds, stabilize your identity, or give meaning to your existence. You become rooted in your own presence. Life itself becomes sacred. Every breath becomes communion rather than compensation. This is where true spiritual wisdom begins, not in possessing another, but in belonging fully to yourself. As this inner union deepens, your understanding of relationships shifts from dependency to devotion, from survival to conscious connection. You stop trying to be saved and start learning how to stand. You stop bargaining for love and start radiating it. Jung's work on individuation reveals that the integration of your inner masculine and feminine is the real marriage. And without that union inside, every external union becomes fragile, burdened with impossible expectations. When you place the responsibility of your wholeness on another human being, love collapses under unbearable weight. But when you carry your own wholeness, love becomes light. This is why the woman who becomes whole no longer enters relationships from fear, nor avoids them from bitterness. She simply sees clearly. She does not reject marriage, but she is no longer ruled by it. She no longer needs permanence to feel safe or permission to feel worthy. Her identity is not shaped by whether she is chosen, but by whether she is aligned with her truth. Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "Love consists in this, that two solitudes protect and touch and greet each other. Most people demand that another fill their solitude before ever learning how to meet it themselves. But the whole woman has already made peace with her own inner space. From this state of inner alignment, love becomes cosmic rather than conditional. It is no longer driven by attachment to outcome, but by presence. She no longer fears abandonment because she is already anchored within. She no longer chases devotion because she embodies it. And in this embodiment, something extraordinary happens. She stops seeking home in another's arms because she has finally become home within herself. As Lao Tzu said, when you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. And when nothing is lacking within you, nothing outside controls you. This is the deeper meaning behind the idea that she is the marriage she was seeking. It is not an attack on love, but a liberation of it. Not a rejection of union, but a return to sacred unity at the source. From this place, partnership is no longer a necessity. It is a conscious choice. No longer a rescue, it is a sharing. No longer a wound seeking relief. It is two flames choosing to burn side by side without consuming one another. The forbidden truth was never that marriage is wrong, but that it was never meant to replace the divine union within you. And when that inner marriage is complete, love does not disappear. It becomes vast, steady, and free. If this message resonated with you, comment, "I am already whole" below. Your reflection helps us connect on a deeper level. In the end, this is not a message of rejection toward love or commitment, but a call for deep awareness, self-sovereignty, and conscious choice. Through Jung's forbidden truth, we are reminded that a woman's wholeness, identity, and purpose must never be sacrificed for social approval or unconscious attachment. Marriage, when entered unconsciously, can become a psychological cage, but when chosen with self-mastery, it can be a sacred union of two complete souls. If this message resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more transformative insights. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos. Why some souls treat their birthday like any other day. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered why some souls feel nothing special about their birthday, treating it like just another day? On Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the deeper psychological and spiritual roots behind this quiet truth of how certain individuals reach a level of inner maturity where external celebrations no longer define their worth. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Do birthdays feel meaningful to you, or do they pass by quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's uncover what this says about your personal growth, self-understanding, and emotional evolution. 1. Past emotional wounds shape birthday behavior. Some souls treat their birthday like any other day because the earliest emotional wounds they experienced quietly shape their relationship with celebration. When someone grows up, never feeling truly celebrated, appreciated, or remembered, the heart begins to form a silent expectation that special days will only highlight the absence of love rather than the presence of it. Forgotten birthdays, unmet hopes, or moments where joy was promised but never delivered create a deep imprint in the mind, teaching it that expecting something good is risky. Over time, the emotional body develops a form of learned helplessness, a protective mechanism whispering, "Do not hope too loudly, nothing good comes from it." This inner narrative becomes so familiar that ignoring their birthday feels safer than facing the possibility of disappointment again. For these individuals, treating their birthday like a normal day is not about a lack of gratitude or an inability to enjoy life, but rather a quiet form of emotional self-protection. Their indifference is often a shield, not a personality trait. Carl Jung often taught that the unconscious mind carries every unhealed wound, and birthdays act as symbolic mirrors, reflecting the echoes of past emotional experiences. When the heart has learned that celebration equals vulnerability, it instinctively chooses neutrality. Feeling nothing becomes easier than risking hurt. So the day passes unnoticed, not because it is meaningless, but because it once held too much meaning. This pattern becomes even more visible in those who walk a path of spirituality and spiritual awakening. As they become more aware of their inner world, they recognize how their sensitivity has been shaped by past emotional neglect. They may prefer stillness, solitude, or simplicity on their birthday because it gives them a sense of control that childhood never offered. Instead of relying on others to create joy, they choose quiet reflection. Yet even this preference for introspection often traces back to emotional conditioning. The soul remembers the moments when love did not arrive, and it adapts by lowering expectations to protect its own softness. Some spiritually awakened individuals even redefine their birthday as an internal checkpoint rather than a social celebration. They reflect, recenter, and observe their own emotional patterns. But beneath this mature viewpoint, an old wound still lingers, the memory of not being seen when it mattered. Their avoidance is not a rejection of joy. It is a defense against reopening an old emotional doorway they fought so hard to close. When viewed from this perspective, treating a birthday like any other day becomes a powerful reminder that every behavior has a story behind it. The way someone responds to their birthday often reveals more about their past than their present. It reflects the survival strategies they developed to navigate emotional deserts and the protective walls they built to keep disappointment at a distance. Over time, with gentleness and awareness, these patterns can soften. But until then, the quiet treatment of a birthday is not indifference. It is the heart's way of keeping itself safe in a world where it once felt unseen. Have you ever noticed your birthday bringing up old emotions or past memories? If yes, share your experience in the comments so others can learn and feel less alone. If not, simply comment, "I'm ready to understand myself more deeply," so we can explore this journey of spiritual wisdom together. 2. Modern life creates time blindness, making birthdays feel insignificant. Modern life quietly shapes a kind of time blindness, where days blend together until even birthdays once filled with excitement start to feel strangely insignificant. And you may find yourself moving through the day without any emotional spark, simply because your mind is already carrying too much. You are not forgetting your birthday on purpose. Rather, you are navigating a world where constant pressure, noise, and responsibility leave very little room for inner celebration. In this state, your attention becomes stretched thin. And as Carl Jung suggested when he said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, It becomes easy for a meaningful day to slip into the background when your inner world feels overloaded. Your mind isn't empty, it's overwhelmed. Work, school, deadlines, expectations, and emotional weight all demand so much space that the arrival of your birthday feels no different from any other sunrise. Not because you don't value the day, but because life itself has consumed your energy. And when you wake up already in mental motion, thinking about what needs to be done, responding to responsibilities, or simply trying to manage your emotional state, the symbolic meaning of a birthday can't break through the noise. You might not feel excited, not because you lack gratitude, but because your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, focusing only on what is urgent, pushing everything else aside. That feeling of your birthday passing without impact is not indifference. It is a sign of how much you've been carrying. This quiet disappearance of emotion often reflects something deeper happening within your spiritual development. As some souls grow internally, they begin to feel less drawn to outward celebration and more connected to inner reflection. What once felt like a reason for parties and attention slowly transforms into a gentle moment of introspection, a day that is no longer a performance, but a private mirror for the soul. You may not consciously realize it, but as you evolve, your values shift. A birthday becomes less about noise and more about truth, less about others and more about yourself. For many on a path of spirituality, the quietness around a birthday is not sadness, it is maturity. It is the soul choosing depth over decoration, choosing stillness over spectacle. And when responsibilities pile up, or emotional fatigue weighs you down, celebrating can feel like another task instead of a joy. So the day passes softly, without drama, without expectation, and without pressure. This silence is not emptiness. It is an unspoken need for space, rest, and inner alignment. Treating your birthday like any ordinary day can reveal more about your inner world than you might expect. It may show that you are overwhelmed and need gentler rhythms. It may show that your soul is quietly awakening, shifting your focus from external validation to internal truth. Or it may show that what you truly crave is not celebration, but understanding of yourself, your journey, and the emotional burdens you've been carrying without realizing it. In that calmness, you are invited to pause, breathe, and listen. Listen to your heart's exhaustion. Listen to the longing for simplicity. Listen to the subtle call of your own spirituality guiding you inward. Because sometimes the quietest birthdays are the ones that reveal the most about who you are becoming. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to affirm it. Repeat after me. I honor my journey, even when the world feels rushed. I choose to see meaning in my life, even on the days that feel ordinary. 3. Emotional independence leads some people to not need birthday validation. Some souls choose to treat their birthday like any other day because they have reached a level of emotional independence where validation is no longer something they seek or rely on. Instead of waiting for others to acknowledge them, they have learned to acknowledge themselves, and this subtle shift reveals a deeper emotional maturity. As Carl Jung once said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. And these individuals embody exactly that. They no longer look outward for signs of worth, belonging, or importance. They understand that a specific date on the calendar does not define their identity. What defines them is the inner peace they carry, the self-awareness they nurture, and the quiet confidence that grows from knowing who they are without anyone else telling them. This third group, as psychologists often describe, makes a conscious decision not to celebrate because they genuinely feel whole without external recognition, parties, or attention. Their choice is not a rejection of joy, but an affirmation of inner fullness. According to self-determination theory, well-being comes from inner autonomy and self-generated meaning, not from the reactions or praise of others. These individuals naturally align with that principle. They don't avoid celebrations out of sadness. Rather, they simply do not depend on them to feel valued. Their self-worth has moved from something fragile and dependent to something rooted and internal. And this quiet transformation allows them to experience life in a more grounded, balanced way. When you look closely at this behavior, you begin to understand that it reflects a form of spiritual wisdom, one that teaches you to find satisfaction not in being the center of attention, but in being centered within yourself. They have learned that presence matters more than performance. They have realized that peace matters more than praise. They no longer chase the emotional highs that come from being celebrated because they have found something more stable, self-acceptance. And when you reach that level of inner clarity, you no longer need a special occasion to feel special. Every day becomes a chance to grow, to observe yourself, and to quietly honor who you are becoming. Carl Jung described this inner unfolding perfectly when he said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." These souls have awakened to something many people never learn: the difference between living for recognition and living from authenticity. They are not cold, distant, or uninterested. They are simply aligned with a deeper truth. They understand that the world does not need to applaud for them to feel alive. They have stopped measuring their worth by the intensity of celebration and started measuring it by the depth of self-understanding. When your sense of identity comes from within, the need for external validation dissolves naturally. And so, their birthday becomes a normal day, not because they lack joy, but because they no longer depend on rituals to access it. Their freedom comes from knowing that they are enough every single day, without needing anyone else to remind them. If emotional independence resonates with you, stay connected. Subscribe for more Carl Jung-inspired spiritual wisdom that helps you understand yourself on a deeper level and turn everyday moments, even birthdays, into powerful insights. 4. How a person treats their birthday reflects their deeper psychological pattern. How a person responds to their birthday often reveals a deeper psychological and spiritual pattern. Because for many individuals who treat their birthday like any other day, it is not a sign of sadness or emotional neglect, but a reflection of inner maturity, quiet self-assurance, and a level of spirituality that no longer depends on external validation. These are the souls who do not crave the spotlight, who do not need applause to feel worthy, and who rarely place their happiness in the hands of others. And this subtle trait often mirrors a profound stage of spiritual awakening, where a person begins to detach from the noise of the world and anchor themselves in a deeper sense of meaning. People who behave this way often move through life with a calm sense of contentment, because instead of waiting for a single date to feel loved, they learn to notice the small, sacred moments that unfold throughout the year. And this quiet, inner satisfaction becomes a form of emotional strength. It is not that they never feel lonely. Loneliness still visits them like it visits everyone. But they have learned that their worth is not increased or diminished because someone bought them a cake or wrote a message on their timeline. For them, meaning is not something reserved. For one day, it is something woven into the ordinary rhythm of their existence. And when you look closely, this behavior often comes from deeper emotional lessons learned over many years. Some of these individuals grew up without grand celebrations, so they learned to celebrate themselves internally. Others realized early on that expectations often lead to disappointment, so they chose to live without depending on others to make them feel special. And then there are those who simply matured spiritually, recognizing that neither age nor external praise defines who they are. This mindset reflects Carl Jung's insight that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because once a person begins to understand themselves on a deeper level, the need for outward recognition fades naturally. Their birthday becomes not a performance, not a stage, but just another chapter in their unfolding story. And in this gentle indifference, there is a powerful message. They are no longer driven by the pressure to appear happy, celebrated, or adored. They have become emotionally self-reliant. Yet this does not mean they reject love. In fact, such souls often appreciate genuine gestures far more than those who expect constant attention. When someone remembers them sincerely, it touches them more deeply, precisely because they are not waiting for it. What they avoid is the superficiality that often surrounds birthdays, the forced cheerfulness, the obligation to perform joy, the draining social expectations. Instead, they prefer authenticity, the quiet warmth of presence, the honesty of simple acts. This mindset reveals a person who values inner truth more than social ritual, someone who sees life not as a collection of events, but as a continuous flow of meaning. And perhaps most importantly, these souls understand that spiritual awakening is not marked by grand celebrations, but by inner shifts, by the ability to sit with oneself, to appreciate the ordinary, to release expectations, and to live with a stable sense of self that does not rise or fall with attention. They treat their birthday like any other day, because every day has become meaningful to them. Every moment holds its own weight, and they no longer need the world's permission to feel worthy. 5. Each birthday attitude reveals something different about the soul. When you look closely at the way someone treats their birthday, you begin to realize that this simple behavior quietly reveals the emotional landscape of their inner world. Because in spirituality, every response, even the quiet ones, reflects a deeper layer of the soul and the current stage of spiritual development. For many people, treating their birthday like any other day is not carelessness. It is a protective instinct shaped by pain, disappointments, and memories that were never healed. Maybe the years when they hoped for something meaningful but received silence taught them to lower their expectations. Or maybe they learned too early that their joy was not a priority to the people around them. In these cases, ignoring the day becomes a shield, a subtle way of saying, "I will not let anyone hurt me again." Carl Jung's teaching, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, speaks directly to this truth, because the way you respond to your birthday often comes from emotional patterns you did not choose, but have carried for years until they feel natural. For others, the reason is entirely different, rooted not in sadness, but in the realities of a busy, demanding life. When your days are filled with work, responsibilities, deadlines, and personal goals, a birthday may feel like just another date on the calendar. Your mind is occupied with what must be done, who relies on you, and the next step on your journey. This doesn't mean you lack gratitude. It simply means your priorities are centered on building stability and growth. You may understand that celebration does not define your worth or progress, and so you keep moving, focused, and disciplined because this is the season of life you're in. Then there are those who treat their birthday like any ordinary day because they have reached a level of emotional independence and inner peace that no longer depends on external recognition. This is where spirituality and spiritual development subtly shine through, because you begin to understand that your value does not come from gifts, parties, or attention, but from the quiet strength you carry within. You no longer need the world to applaud you to feel significant. You already recognize your own growth, your resilience, and the silent victories that no one else knows about. Your birthday becomes less a performance and more a reflection of a private moment of gratitude rather than an event to be displayed. In this stage, maturity replaces expectation, stillness replaces longing, and personal meaning replaces tradition. You honor the day without needing anything extravagant, because your peace is not tied to circumstances, but to the stability of your inner world. And so, whether your birthday feels heavy, invisible, calm, or completely normal, it is never random. It is a mirror showing you where your heart has been, what it has survived, what it prioritizes now, and how far your soul has traveled on its path. Pain reveals healing is needed. Busyness reveals your dedication. Peace reveals your growth. Whatever your response may be, it carries a message that encourages you to understand yourself with compassion and to recognize the quiet wisdom your soul is expressing through something as simple as the way you greet your own birthday. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and remember to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming teachings. Comment below. I honor the truth of my soul, to affirm your inner awareness and inspire others on their journey. In the end, the deeper message is clear. Some souls treat their birthday like any other day, not because they lack joy, but because they have matured beyond external celebrations and learned to find meaning within themselves. Their inner world becomes the true source of renewal, reflection, and quiet transformation. If this perspective resonates with you, remember to like this video, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos.